Hello there, welcome back to the channel. Now imagine for a second that an alien entity was to just scoop up your little ship. You're there in space, minding your own business, maybe on a search and rescue mission, and some great galactic power beyond your comprehension just scoops your ship up and flicks you across the entire galaxy. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? And then you get stuck there. What do? Well, if you're Janeway, you get yourself a cup of coffee, kidnap a couple of aliens, start a fight with the local bullies, and then go on a load of dangerous side quests until you eventually stumble upon a way home. Kick over the Borg beehive a little bit, and then, yeah, deal with the consequences later. And that gets you home in just 7 years. But do we ever wonder if maybe there was another way? Now, we do know other ships were dragged to the Delta Quadrant. First and foremost, quite obviously, the Valjean, Chakotay's Marquis ship, a Condor-class courier vessel, a colonial transport converted into a Marquis raider, which Voyager was looking for. We also know a Cardassian ship was dragged there and then was probably destroyed when it got back. And we also know the USS Equinox got there. And this got me thinking, just what would happen if, say, a different ship got stuck in the Delta Quadrant? It wasn't Voyager. Because we know that Voyager was a decent ship to be stuck in. You really think about it. If you had a choice between the Equinox and Voyager, which you picking? I know I'm picking Voyager. Now, there's a lot of things made about how Voyager seemed remarkably intact, for going on such a journey. But we've got to remember, Voyager was a state-of-the-art, ultra-modern, late 24th century starship built for deep space exploration. There's maybe an argument to be made that Voyager was still on its maiden voyage and wasn't even fitted out properly. For a start, why did they need to build the Delta Flyer when they had the detachable scout ship at the front of the ship, the captain's yacht or whatever you want to call it? Why did they never use that? Theory, it wasn't finished. But let's move on. Obviously, the Equinox, though, was an inferior vessel for the mission. It wasn't just Captain Ransom and his crew were not as good, although there is a decent argument to make there. But the ship itself was not equipped. No holodecks, limited defenses comparatively, a lot slower, much smaller ship with a limited cargo capacity. This was a medium-range starship, whereas Voyager was an Intrepid-class starship. But what if a Galaxy-class had got stuck there? So that's what we're going to explore. What ifs if a different ship had ended up in the Delta Quadrant? So let's start with that. What if you were aboard a Galaxy-class starship? Doesn't have to be the Enterprise. Let's keep this nice and generic. Galaxy-class starship stranded in the Delta Quadrant. How do they fare? I think they fare pretty well, personally. I think if Voyager could do it as an Intrepid-class, Galaxy-class is a bit older, but it is a much more robust and capable starship. It's not actually as well armed as you would think. It's a heavily armed ship for its size, but Voyager is more cleverly armed and is probably better armed than a Galaxy-class starship. For a start, it had photon and quantum torpedoes, something a Galaxy-class ship did not have. Galaxy-class vessels certainly, though, had a weight advantage. Far larger cargo capacities, onboard fabrication capabilities, better navigational systems, not to mention just a bigger ship in general. The internal mass, much more crew, plus more specialists and scientists as well as civilian on site who could make themselves useful. As a generational vessel, a Galaxy-class ship would also work better than an Intrepid-class starship. Yeah, you got a bit of room for Naomi Wildman, but really how much room was there in Voyager for them all to start having babies? Galaxy-class ship, it's gonna fare a little better. It might be a bit slower, but the average sustainable cruise velocity is what matters, and for a Galaxy-class ship, that was about 6.6. It's roughly the same as Voyager. So, personally, I think they're doing pretty well. As the average Starfleet crew, they're probably going to conduct themselves in a similar way to Janeway. We've got to assume that the crews are just competent here, so they're going to probably do similar things. But I think a Galaxy-class ship will be far more formidable. It would be much less of a target for the Kazon and the Deans to deal with, and with a massive influx of resources that this ship will be able to do. For, again, the onboard fabrication facilities, more holodecks, more crew recreational facilities, the psychological advantage of the crew is all there. Probably got a ship's counselor on board here. That ship's going to have every advantage. So let's move on. I'd say an Oberth got stuck there. They're screwed. Just settle on Ocampa. Don't even try. Settle on Ocampa. You're done. Forget it. Yeah, I think they're getting destroyed in a battle with the Kazon. That's what's going to happen with them. That ship's not up to it. Now let's go, though, outside of the Federation. Let's have a little bit more fun. We did know a Cardassian ship got dragged to the Delta Quadrant. So what then? We know that Seska said if this was a Cardassian vessel, we'd have been home by now. We have to, by the way, assume that the Caretaker's array is destroyed no matter what. Everyone makes the same decision for it to be destroyed. So how's a Cardassian ship faring? I actually don't believe a Cardassian ship would have made it home, the same way she thinks. I think certainly the Cardassians would have resorted to trading technology, making themselves a few allies along the way, but Cardassian ruthlessness and brutality would probably make them more of a target rather than someone that people would ally with. If anything, the Cardassians would probably end up having to settle. Let's assume it's a Cardassian Galler class ship. The Galler class is much smaller than a Galaxy class, probably roughly comparable actually to an Intrepid, but I think it's a little bigger without checking that, but it's a far less technologically advanced starship. It is a pure military vessel. Pure military ships tend to be more resource intensive. They need external facilities to repair and operate. Galler class ships also carry a crew of around 600 personnel, which is a mighty large crew, which is going to have a lot of need. So unless this particular gull is ruthless and decides to either abandon half of their crew or kill half of their crew, maybe eat them, they ain't doing so well. I don't think the Cardassians are making it. What about, is an interesting thought, a Romulan warbird, the Derridix class, one of the biggest ships in the Alpha and Beta quadrants. I absolutely adore that vessel. I think it's a beautiful design. How does a Romulan warbird fare? I'm going to say really well, personally. My theory, Romulan warbird is a phenomenally advanced powerhouse of technology and capabilities. There is perhaps less internal volume on these ships than you would think because of this large negative space they have, but they are certainly a capable starship, and they are fast. They've got a lot of power. They're extremely advanced, and the cloaking device is going to come in handy for sneaking through territory you don't want them to notice you. Romulans are a crafty and manipulative and cunning people. I think they're doing all right. Do I think they're going to make as many allies as Starfleet? No. Might they resort to a violent solution over a diplomatic one a little faster? Yes. But they're not stupid. Romulans are surprisingly human-like. So I think, all in all, they're probably going to do all right. There is perhaps a secondary question as to if there are any Reman aboard the ship, how are they going to react? Are they going to maintain the status quo, or are they going to try and rise up or gain their freedom? Secondary thought, really. But I think Romulans are doing all right. What about the Klingons? Now, I think if you're aboard a bird of prey, even one of the bigger covert class, you're doomed. Not got the range, not got the resources. I think the Klingons are screwed and they'd just end up a bunch of pirates hanging out in the Delta Quadrant. But we did encounter a Klingon battlecruiser. And although it was ultimately destroyed, it was destroyed by Klingon hands, and it had made it the same distance as Voyager, in fact further, traveling for decades at warp, traveling from the Klingon territory deep into the Delta Quadrant. It had made that journey already, just in the opposite direction. So actually, I think give the Klingons a battlecruiser. I think we're underestimating them. I think the Klingons going to be all right. I do think they'd struggle with one of their smaller ships like a bird of prey, but certainly with a battlecruiser, certainly with one of their larger Nekvars or Vorchak class, I think they're all right. Let's have some fun. The Packlids. They're dead. They're dead. They're doomed. They settled on a colony. Oh, they're dead. I'm not even exploring that one any further. Packlids, they're doomed. It'll be the same with some of the more extreme races like the Gorn and the Tholians, I think. I think their ability to interact with other races will be difficult and make it hard. Ferengi, probably doing all right. You drop a Ferengi Decora class out there, I think it's doing okay. I think a Ferengi Decora class is going to make it. They're going to barter, trade, steal, do whatever they have to do to make it home, and even probably make a tidy profit along the way. The Dominion. Let's say a Dominion attack cruiser. Let's not go nuts. And one of their little attack ships, yeah, they ain't doing much. But one of the attack cruisers. Now, we don't actually know much about the internal capabilities, the full capabilities of a Dominion attack ship. Of a Dominion attack cruiser, rather. But I think it's a fair assessment to say that they're a powerful ship, and they're probably long range. I don't think the founders want the Jem'Hadar and the Vorta to be too independent, but the needs of the crew are limited. Now, the average attack ship had about 40 Jem'Hadar on board, and a Vorta. Scale that up to the larger cruisers, and the cruisers probably have, they're about the same size as a Galaxy class, easily 1,000 Jem'Hadar on board. Probably a Vorta. How many? Not sure, but I would say there's going to be at least one to command the ship. There might even be, say, a couple of dozen Vorta aboard a ship that size to make sure it has a properly staffed command crew, as well as alternatives. But only the Vorta require anything. Now, there is the problem of the Ketracel White. The Vorta do not know how to make it, so unless they could either figure out how to make it or find a local supply of it, the Jem'Hadar are all going to die and probably kill the Vorta. So unless they manage to find a way home pretty damn fast, and bear in mind, Dominion territory is actually closer to the Delta Quadrant than Federation space is, they don't have as far to travel. But even with rationing, even with culling the crew to extend the rations of Ketracel White, I think because the Jem'Hadar are addicted to it, and because the Founders don't really want their ships to be too independent of the rest of the Dominion, I doubt they're carrying enough stores for a long journey. So, they're doomed. Unless they get rid of all the Jem'Hadar, manage to clone themselves a few more Vorta, that ship ain't making it back. It could try and perch camp and try and, conquer territory in the name of the Founders and hold that territory until they all die, which the Jem'Hadar would probably be up for, but I don't know if the Vorta would be. A Vulcan ship. How would the Vulcans fare if a Vulcan starship, 24th century Vulcan vessel, got dragged to Delta? And we see in the 22nd century, which is the main area we see the Vulcans operating. Vulcan ships were powerful. They were long range, but they tended to stay close to home. And although they were fast, Vulcan ships tended to be very function orientated, which by what I mean they're quite specialized. This doesn't seem to have changed much by the 24th century from what we can see. A single Vulcan ship, bear in mind this was a science vessel, ended up in a fight with, again, a Pakled ship, who I've already established I think would just all die. The Vulcan vessel was not able to engage that, but a California-class starship, the Cerritos, came to its aid and was, meaning the power dynamic versus the Vulcans, the Starfleet, versus what it was in the 22nd century, has done a 180. Vulcan ships are nowhere near as powerful as what they were. They were not the powerhouse of technology and capabilities. But there's also Vulcan culture to consider. I've always personally thought that their philosophical dedication to logic above all other things, not embracing any other way of approaching a problem, is a limitation. And them being part of the Federation, part of this bigger society, has been beneficial greatly to both the Vulcans and everybody else, because it tempers human emotion, it tempers Andorian aggression, but Vulcans are somewhat given a new perspective on the universe by taking the point of view of those that are perhaps a little less logical and a little bit more passionate. Vulcans, as a result, can be a little standoffish. Many races don't necessarily know how to deal with them. Now, you dump them in a region of space where nobody knows how to deal with them, and maybe you got yourself a problem. The Vulcans only know one way of approaching everything, and that is logically. They're going to take a direct route. Now, there could be an argument to be made they won't go on lots of dangerous side quests, but again, in my opinion, all those dangerous little side quests that a ship like Voyager went on, or even the Equinox, led the Equinox to a spatial vortex, brought allies, and found resources for Voyager, like coffee and nebulas. So, it's a good thing to go on these little adventures, even with the extra risks. The Vulcans simply would decide that those risks are probably not worth the reward, because it's a completely unknown. So it's hard to say. I don't think an average Vulcan ship in that time period is anywhere near as powerful as Voyager. I suspect it to be another Equinox situation where the Vulcan ship simply lacks the resources, size, scale, and material capabilities to make the journey. So I'm sorry. Maybe controversially, I think the Vulcans, they're doomed. Doomed. So that's a quick breakdown of what I think would happen to a variety of different Federation and non-Federation starships if they were whisked all the way to the Delta Quadrant and abandoned there like Voyager. And similar to Voyager, didn't simply get sent home like the Caretaker, but had to stay and go on a myriad of adventures and try and plod their way home. But obviously there are literally thousands of other species and probably millions of other kinds of starships that could have ended up stuck there. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section down below what you would think would happen to these ships, but also give me your suggestions. Tell me what had happened to a Qatarian ship, Rigelian vessels, or Bajoran ships if they were stranded there, because they're fairly close to the region of space where the caretaker was, kidnapping everyone from. They could easily fall into that. What would have happened if the Zosa ended up there? Let me know in the comment section down below what you think would have happened to these other kind of alien vessels, and let me know your suggestions as to other ships that I didn't mention and what you think would happen to them. And with that said, I hope you made it all this in the video and enjoyed it. Thank you for watching, and bye-bye.